We would like to ask the winner of the Building Sense Now Global Award on stage. It's Anna Heringer. Yeah, big round of applause. So Anna is, I would say, a true believer. And I met Anna personally this year in Cairo at the Holcim Lafarge event, where Anna, in the end, was giving a little speech, and eventually that speech turned out to be a very direct message to the CEO of Holcim Lafarge, who was sitting in the first row, and I think felt very uncomfortable to be put on the spot for what a big corporation and one of the biggest CO2 emitter producing concrete is doing. Anna was born in Laufen. It's close to the Austrian border, very close to the Austrian border. You used to live in Bangladesh for a year, and basically you work just with natural material, especially rammed earth. I think you developed together with Thomas Rau, and you will give a little presentation later about your work. So another big round of applause.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Bruno, for this wonderful award. I got some awards in the beginning of my career, like the Aga Khan Award or some other awards. And it was during a time where I had projects only far away in a small village in Bangladesh. So people, when they heard about the project, they felt all very comfortable. Yeah, mud is a very good material for those of poor countries. And then I also started to talk about using earth in Europe and in our parts of the world, and suddenly the award stopped, and probably I got a bit uncomfortable, you know, also about changing our way of doing architecture. So this is the very first award after a long dry season, and I'm very happy, especially because it comes from such a great and distinguished jury. Thank you very much. So, architecture is a tool to improve life. This is something I really deeply believe in. For me, it's really a great tool to enhance social justice, to, of course, care for our planet, and also foster a cultural diversity, which Christine also mentioned in the beginning. It's very important that we're not just building everywhere in the same way. We have local materials, we have local climate, and if we take these two parameters in consideration, we create architecture that is ultimately and really deeply linked and rooted to a place and is having a great authenticity that radiates also a lot of beauty. It was the end of October in the mountains in Austria, and I was there with my students on a field trip from ETH Zurich. And when the group reached the high valley, I surprised them with the news that there was no hut or hotel or any accommodation booked for the night. It was rather cold on that day. It was still at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You could see the frost on the ground, and the reactions were a bit mixed. So they were in Switzerland. Of course, you have the outdoor freaks who were like, you know, super. We have a challenge, and the challenge was actually to create a shelter for one night, you know, with whatever you could find. And since they were all going to be architects, I thought it was a good test for them, you know, at least for one night to build a shelter. And it was also during a time where there were a lot of refugees coming, and we wanted to also empathically zoom ourselves in the mind of those refugees with what does shelter really mean. And it was cold, it was really cold, so part were excited of the group, another part was thinking, yeah, there must be a plan B, but there was no plan B. And then the third part was really just utterly shocked, but everyone survived, including me. It was not a very luxurious night. But it was a great learning experience to discover that there are a lot of resources given by nature for free, and all we need is the sensitivity to see those resources and our creativity to use them. And I found myself in a similar situation when I was 19, and I went to Bangladesh, to a small remote village called Rutupur, and I was a development learner or a volunteer at a Bangladeshi NGO called Dipshika, that cares for the rural development. And what I had learned from them was that the most effective strategy for sustainable development is to use the existing resources, to see the value in those and make the best out of it, and not get dependent on external factors. And that was what I was trying to transform or transmit into architecture like 7 years later. I went back to this village called Rotterpur, where I lived before, with the aim to design and to build a school with whatever I could find. And the local materials were right under my feet, the mud and the bamboo that was growing all around. And as energy source, I use people. I mean, when we think of alternative energies, we think of solar, wind, and so on. But human energy is also a very important source of energy. And furthermore, if we don't use this 7 billion people energy, we also create a social problem. So for me, this is a very important source of energy. Tools were an issue too, but we had these guys, water buffaloes. They were our mixing machines. We had also tried it with cows before, but interestingly, the ladies were too intelligent. They would always elegantly step in the holes of the previous round and wouldn't mix the mud and the straw and the water, which are the ingredients for the mix. Yeah, the workers were coming all from the direct village and the neighboring villages. And I had a small team, of foreign experts like my cousin, a carpenter and basket weaver, Emmanuel, and also an architect from Berlin, Eike Roswak, who helped me in realizing the school. So after 6 months, the school looked like this. Load-bearing earth walls that really ground the school, and then a bamboo floor that kind of brings the lightness in. And that's the ground floor classroom. It's tradition in the rural areas to sit on the floor. We kept this tradition, and through these holes there in the back wall, you come into the cave areas, and they are for snuggling, for playing, for meditating, for reading, for doing solo work or teamwork. And the idea behind was just to remember the spaces that I loved when I was a kid, and I think a kid in Bavaria is not so much different from a kid in Bangladesh. These kind of archaic spaces are just, that goes with everyone. And that's the top floor classroom. The children all signed with their names in Bengali at the doors, and they rightfully signed because they also helped building the school. So every afternoon we had especially a team with Montessori teachers from Austria with us, Christine and Clemens, who were just there to supervise the kids, because it was really a big wish of mine that the future users can be part of that process. And of course you cannot do this with concrete or steel or whatever, but with mud, it's like clay modeling in a larger scale, and the children loved it. And I guess you can all imagine how it feels after 6 months as a small girl or boy or illiterate day labor standing in front of the school, knowing that you built this out of the dirt beneath your feet and the bamboo growing around using just your hands. That's an enormous boost of confidence in yourself, in the team, and of course also in the local materials. And normally mud and bamboo, especially mud, has a very poor image all over the world, as non-durable, as ugly, as, you know, only suitable for small, dark, humid huts. But actually mud houses can stand hundreds of years if you just consider certain rules. And the first rule is good boots, a good foundation that prevents the walls from the damp from the ground. And the second rule is a good roof to keep the walls dry from the top. And the third rule is erosion control. Mud walls need speed breakers so that the water cannot flow down over the facade in a fast way. Just like a hill needs rocks or needs trees in order to prevent erosion, that's the same thing. So you could use shingle lines of bamboo or bricks or mortar. And then also the mix itself needs some roughness. Like for example in Bangladesh we used straw because we didn't have stones, but of course like for rammed earth you would have the stones that gives the roughness. And of course you would have a small kind of erosion on the facade, 1-2 centimeters, but then the facade is only getting a bit rougher. It doesn't change the color. There is no fungus on it. It's really, really aging beautifully. And after some years, the erosion stops. So mud is, people always ask me if I use cement in the walls. Absolutely not. It's non-stabilized walls. The only way where I use the cement is the foundation, because the good boots need some sort of stable material, and there are no stones in Bangladesh, so this is the only part where I use it, and absolutely nothing of cement in the walls. And that's very important because mud is the only material that you can take from nature, can recycle as often as you want without any loss of quality, and you can return it to the ground it came from and plant your garden on top. It's fantastic. It couldn't be better in terms of the circularity of materials. If I had added some sort of stabilizer, I would destroy this circle. In terms of economic sustainability, it was particularly interesting for me because I was living with the people. So in the evening, I would go with them on the local markets, and I could see how they spent the budget of the daily salary that they got every evening. And they would buy the vegetables from the neighbors, or would get a new haircut, or would invest in a new piece of clothes from the local tailor. So the money was not just, in the end, created a building. It was at the same time a catalyst for local development, and that made me most happy. Because if I had built the school in concrete or steel, then this money would have been lost for those communities. Yeah, in our modern world, it may seem unexpected, but about 3 billion people on this planet live in mud houses. We always think, you know, it's much more is cement or whatever, the classical architecture, but that is just in our world around. Of course, these numbers are going down, and people are replacing their mud houses with bricks or with cement houses. But traditionally, in every climate zone, on every continent, it was used for any sort of purpose, and that's very important. We simply cannot afford that these people are turning into cement houses and structures anymore. So we really need to care also in our parts of the world, because we are kind of leading examples to use cement and concrete only where it's absolutely possible. I'm not saying that cement or concrete is a bad material, but it's a very precious material because it has a lot of CO2 embedded, so we need to use it really carefully and only where it's necessary. So that's my daughter. I'm fighting with her. She's supporting my work, and I'm carrying her signboard now all around the world in different places. And of course, when I bring this thing to Africa, then they are of course asking me, and are you also building something in Germany with this material? And yes, meanwhile, it took me 12 years to finally get a commission in my own home country after building in Africa and Asia and even a little bit in the US. But finally, I'm also building at home. Yeah, but what is very important, strangely, more and more countries are not allowing load-bearing earthen walls anymore. I was just last week at the World Architectural Festival where we gave the award to a Mexican collective, and they told me they are fighting against the government because the government does not allow it in Mexico, where it's such a traditional material, load-bearing earth walls anymore. So which is really an absurd situation. This is happening in more and more African countries as well, and also in Italy. So more and more governments and regulations are against the use of local materials such as earth. And this is not because the material is weak, but because there are no engineers and architects who can deal with that material. And of course the missing lobby. But education is key, and strangely, mud is not part of curriculums at the universities, so I brought the mud to Harvard. Precisely 60 tons of dirt right in front of the front facade of the Graduate School of Design. And 150 faculty members, students, and also people from Cambridge rolled up their sleeves and got their hands dirty to transform the front of the Graduate School of Design into a warm place for people to gather. So you would find skaters, you would find kids around, professors having lunch breaks, students, you would even sometimes find homeless people in the night sleeping there. So suddenly this place was really a place for meeting and exchange. And normally it's just a passage, a windy, noisy passage. What was also very interesting for me was to see that so many people were touching the wall. And interestingly, the mud in Boston is gray, so it looked practically like the concrete in the background. But people were constantly intuitively touching the walls. And for me, it was such a sign that we not only perceive materials in a visual way, but there must be more. And there's a very old connection, obviously, with human beings and the element earth. So equally important to education on all levels, craftsmen, engineers, architects, is also technical development, such as prefabrication, developed by my colleague, an Austrian artist and rammed earth specialist, Martin Rauch. And he created the technologies for prefabricated rammed earth elements that already include insulation, all technical fittings, wall heatings or coolings or all sorts of things. And that can simply be stapled on site. And these are some of his projects that he just realized. Oh, why this is not working? Oh. So this, for example, is an office building, Alnatura in Germany. That one is a printing shop in Austria. And that's a birds center in Switzerland. So it's definitely possible also in Europe to build with this also larger structures in this material, and you don't need water buffaloes for that. That's the great thing with earth. You can use it in a high-tech way, as this picture is showing, or in a very low-tech way with absolutely no electricity, with just human labor. That, of course, depends a lot on the context that it's used. But it means that scaling up is absolutely possible, especially because this material is widely available almost everywhere in the world at no or very little cost. And it can be used with all sorts of technologies as well. And also important are modern buildings that prove you can build with an old material also in a modern way. I'm sometimes used if I want to send people back to Stone Age, of course not, but who says that they cannot build with earth or bamboo also in a modern way? It's our core capacity as designers and architects to use materials in a way that we meet the needs and dreams of the present society. These were 3 hostels that are built in China. The idea was to present bamboo in a different way. That was the client's briefing. They wanted to show the beauty of bamboo structures. And of course, I sneaked in some mud in the core. And of course, rammed earth is a traditional material in China, but globally, cities are consuming more cement now than ever in the history of our planet, and of course, this comes with consequences. In China, for example, between 2011 and 13, China consumed more cement than the United States in the past 100 years. And of course, this is not just China. Other countries like India are following this pattern. So we clearly need alternatives to that scenario, and earth is this kind of, can be one of the alternatives. And it doesn't necessarily have to look like these kind of structures. They also could look like this. It's a project in Austria I did with Martin Rauch. That's my own home. It's a very old building, 500 years old, but interior I brought in my 6 tons of mud. Oh, what is happening here? Okay. And of course, you can also really design the earth in a more artistic and beautiful way. This is our latest structure in Bangladesh. And of course, also for interiors, it's possible to do it with earth plasters. The last project I want to show is the very first project I did in Germany. It's for the 1000th anniversary of the cathedral in Worms. People wanted to give the temporary altar that they had a permanent form. And it was difficult because the interior is all Balthasar Neumann, who is kind of the German the German Baroque architect, so it was very difficult to find a good architectural concept for that, and the parish, the community called out for a competition, and then it was like the final round. There was a really beautifully designed object out of steel, and then our project of Martin Rauch and myself was more to bring the material in rather than a perfectly designed object, and to kind of also have the ability to not just build an altar, but also build up the community, because this is what I learned in Bangladesh, the power of the process. So we wanted to bring this also to Germany, because this is actually what we are lacking in our society. We are not lacking materials. What we are lacking is good relationships and meaning in life, and this we wanted to bring in through this process. So the community decided on our project, and we turned this beautiful kind of most sacred space of this cathedral into a construction site, brought the material, local earth, and then we started filling it and ramming it. And everyone from the community was involved, from the small kids till, this was the kind of this council from the parish. And the thing is, it looks easy, but after a while, it's really exhausting. And that's important, because, when you just have participation where you leave your fingerprint in, then you will never have this kind of feeling of, yes, we have to stay together. We have to really pull all our energy together on one direction to reach an aim. And that was really something important in this process. Yeah, this was the priest of the cathedral, and it was interesting, because I think he was really worried in the beginning to take the wrong decision. Such an important interior, such an important historic cathedral. And then as he is a man of belief, he consulted the Bible. And interestingly, he found a part, and not just any part, it's the part where Moses is getting the 10 Commandments from God, and he not only gets the 10 Commandments, he also gets a very clear description how to build the altar, and it says, build this altar out of earth. So from that moment on, he was very motivated and really, really worked hard on this structure. We also brought in historic elements of the town of Worms, so from the Roman times and from all kind of centuries we brought in pieces. And then it was also interesting, because it was, there were journalists coming, then it was in the radio, in the local newspapers, and suddenly people were coming and bringing their own personal stories of if it was an amulet, or it was an old book, or a letter, or honey, or the best wine of this region, and seeds and whatever, and of course also earth from all over the world came in. And it was also a very beautiful moment for me when an Indian nun came, and she put in a piece of Indian soil, and she was really crying and very emotional, and we could see that Mother Earth is not just a building material, it's very symbolic, and it's very touching us really deep within. The kids were also coming, and for some it was the first time that they really had their hands full in earth, and they clearly enjoyed it. And the kindergarten teacher, she brought pink and green glitter, you see it here. The priest was upset, and she was always trying to sneak in the glitter, and we were all a bit afraid that in the end the altar would really pink glitter all over. There's only one small part got really glitter on the side. And then the moment came, when the chicken comes out of the egg. And normally that's the most important part of the project for an architect, when you finally see the result of your doing or idea, whatever. But I felt in the beginning it's not so important anymore, because the process was already so powerful. So for me, the process is really just as important as the outcome. And then we just couldn't really, kept standing around the altar and pampering our baby. And in the end, it looked like this. And the fascinating thing also with Earth is once it's there, you cannot say anymore if it's just completely new structure or if it's there since hundreds of years. This kind of archaic power is really embedded in this material. Yeah, besides building schools and altars and so on, I would love to build a mud skyscraper right in Manhattan or in Madrid. And this idea isn't so crazy if you think of the mud city of Shibam in Yemen that has lasted for 500 years now. So what was possible that long ago is possible today as well with all our technologies. And we should apply it to this ancient material to meet the needs and the dreams of our current society. From climate neutral production to socially just implementation, Earth really has a great potential to help mitigating two of our largest problems, which is climate change and poverty. So all around us and just below our feet are fantastic natural building materials. Let's use them. And I'm deeply convinced that our homes, our workspaces, and our villages and cities would not just become more healthy and sustainable, but also more humane and beautiful. Thank you.